Daniel's message sat on his phone for 3 days, unopened. Not because he didn't see it, but because he was afraid of what answering it might change. Sometimes, silence feels safer than truth until it quietly begins to shape your life. Daniel was the kind of man people described as reliable. Not exciting, not mysterious, just steady. At 41, he lived alone in a modest apartment outside Chicago. He worked as a project manager for a mid-sized logistics company, a job that required him to solve problems without making noise. He was good at it. Deadlines were met, conflicts were resolved. His name rarely came up in meetings, which, in his world, meant success. Silence had always worked for Daniel. Growing up, he learned early that staying quiet kept things calm. His father had a temper, not violent, just sharp. Words in that house could turn into weapons without warning. Daniel noticed that when he spoke less, the air felt safer. When he listened more, trouble passed him by. That habit followed him into adulthood. He was the man who let others finish talking, the man who nodded instead of argued, the man who absorbed tension so others didn't have to deal with it. People appreciated that. But appreciation is not the same as being known. Daniel didn't talk much about himself, not because he didn't have thoughts or opinions, he had plenty, but because expressing them felt risky. Silence gave him control. Words felt unpredictable. Then there was Emma. They met 8 years earlier at a friend's backyard barbecue. She laughed easily, spoke openly, and asked questions that made people feel seen. Daniel liked that she talked enough for both of them. With her, his calm felt balanced, even useful. Emma used to say, "You're calm. You make the world slow down." Daniel liked that idea. He liked being the steady presence. They moved in together after 2 years. Their relationship looked solid from the outside. No loud fights, no dramatic scenes, just two adults building a life. But beneath that calm surface, something subtle began to grow. Emma talked, Daniel listened. At first, that dynamic felt natural. Then it became habitual. Then it became a pattern neither of them questioned. When Emma asked how his day was, Daniel gave short answers. When she shared her worries, he nodded. When decisions needed to be made, he deferred. "I trust you," he'd say. What he didn't say was, "I'm afraid to disagree." Silence became his shield again. Over time, Emma began to notice something missing. Not arguments, but connection. She felt like she was living beside Daniel, not with him. One evening, she said softly, "Sometimes I don't know what you're thinking." Daniel smiled. Nothing special. That was the problem. The first time Emma asked if he was truly happy, Daniel said yes without thinking. The word came automatically, like muscle memory. He didn't pause to check if it was true. Silence had trained him well. The message arrived on a Tuesday night. Daniel was halfway through reheating leftovers when his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen. Emma. They had broken up 6 months earlier. The separation wasn't explosive. No betrayal, no screaming, just exhaustion. Emma had finally said what she'd been holding inside for years. "I feel alone with you," she said. "I don't know how to reach you. I can't build a future with someone who won't show up emotionally." Daniel didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't explain. He did what he had always done when things felt overwhelming. He stayed silent. And Emma walked away. Now, 6 months later, her name on his screen felt heavier than any argument ever had. He didn't open the message. That night, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling. His apartment was quiet in a way that felt different now. Not peaceful, but empty. Silence had stopped feeling protective. It felt exposed. The next morning, he still hadn't opened the message. At work, he went through meetings on autopilot. His boss praised his consistency. A coworker asked how he was doing. Daniel said, "Good." That evening, he sat alone with his phone again. Why was he avoiding it? Because opening the message meant engaging, and engaging meant responding, and responding meant choosing words instead of silence. It meant risk. On the third day, something small but unexpected happened. Daniel was waiting in line at a coffee shop when the man in front of him started arguing with the barista, loud, defensive, over something minor. Daniel felt a familiar instinct. Stay out of it, let it pass. But then he noticed the barista's face, tight, overwhelmed, trying to stay professional. Before he could overthink it, Daniel spoke. "Hey, it's not worth the stress. Let's all just breathe for a second." The line went quiet. The man muttered something under his breath and stepped aside. The barista exhaled, grateful. Daniel felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Relief. Not from silence, but from speaking. That night, he opened Emma's message. It was simple. "I don't want to get back together, but I think we should talk. There are things we never said." Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. This was the moment. Ignore it, and life would continue in its quiet, controlled way. Respond, and he'd have to face everything he'd avoided. His fears, his habits, his unspoken truths. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't default to silence. He typed back, "I'm willing to talk." They met at a small cafe halfway between their apartments. Emma looked familiar but different, lighter somehow, more grounded. Daniel realized that while he had been standing still, she had been moving forward. They ordered coffee, sat down. Silence hovered between them, but this time it felt like an invitation, not a shield. Emma spoke first. "I'm not angry," she said. "I just needed you to hear me, even now." Daniel nodded, then stopped himself. "No," he said. "I mean, I hear you, but I also need to say something." His voice felt unfamiliar in his own ears. Emma waited. "I thought staying quiet was keeping the peace," Daniel said slowly. "But I see now it was avoiding responsibility. I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to disappoint you. So I disappeared instead." Emma listened without interrupting. "I didn't realize how much silence costs," he continued. "I thought words caused damage, but not saying them caused more." Emma's eyes softened, not with relief, but recognition. She said, "I needed you to choose me, not silently, out loud." Daniel swallowed. "I didn't know how." They didn't reconcile that day. The conversation wasn't a reunion, it was a release. For the first time, Daniel left the conversation feeling lighter, not heavier. But growth has consequences. Speaking up didn't magically fix his life, it disrupted it. At work, Daniel began expressing opinions in meetings. Some were welcomed, some were challenged. He realized something surprising. Disagreement didn't end relationships, avoidance did. With friends, he stopped being the agreeable one. He set boundaries. He admitted when he was tired, when he disagreed, when he didn't know. Some people adjusted, some didn't. Silence had kept everyone comfortable. Honesty didn't. And that was okay. There were nights when Daniel missed the old version of himself, the quiet one who never risked conflict. But he couldn't unsee the truth anymore. Silence wasn't neutral. It was a decision, and every decision had a cost.
Daniel learned something most people don't realize until much later in life. Silence is not always wisdom. Sometimes it's fear wearing a calm mask. We're taught that staying quiet keeps relationships intact, that avoiding hard conversations makes life easier, that peace comes from not rocking the boat. But real peace doesn't come from avoiding storms. It comes from learning how to speak during them. Unspoken feelings don't disappear. They settle. They shape how close or distant we become. Over time, silence becomes a language of absence. The lesson wasn't that Daniel needed to talk more. It was that he needed to talk honestly. There's a difference between being calm and being invisible, between listening and erasing yourself, between patience and self-abandonment. Silence can protect, but it can also isolate. And the most dangerous thing about silence is that it convinces you nothing is wrong, right up until everything falls apart. Months later, Daniel sat alone again, this time by choice, not habit. His phone rested on the table, silent. He wasn't afraid of that silence anymore, because now it was intentional. He had learned when to speak and when to pause, when silence was strength and when it was avoidance. And he wondered how many lives quietly drift apart, not because of what was said, but because of what never was. So here's the question to leave you with. In your life right now, is your silence bringing peace or slowly creating distance?